And we are live, folks. President Biden announced on Wednesday a massive round of student loan forgiveness. Is this fair? Will it exacerbate inflation? Also, Fauci is retiring, and to commemorate this momentous occasion, we collected some of Fauci's greatest hits. We're going to be talking about this and more in episode 360 of the In the Tank podcast. All right, welcome to the In the Tank podcast. As always, I'm your host, Donald Kendal. Come to me, my babies. Let me heal your pain. Jim, do you know who used to open up his show saying that?
I forget. I recognize the phrase, but I forget where it comes from.
Dennis Miller. I used to watch his show.
Oh, that's right.
All the time.
That's right.
So we got Jim Lakely joining us, VP of the Heartland Institute. How are you doing today, good sir?
I'm doing well. Just heard news today that the greatest men's tennis player currently playing tennis. I'm a big tennis fan. Here is a tennis ball that I have in my office. Novak Djokovic, maybe when it's all said and done, the greatest men's tennis player of all time, will not be allowed into the United States to play the U.S. Open. That starts, I think, next weekend. And that is because he is not vaccinated. Even though he's had COVID, and even though he is immune, and even though the CDC says it doesn't matter whether you're vaccinated or not, he's not allowed into the country because we are run by idiot tyrants.
Well, we'll have a lot to say about one of those idiot tyrants in the second half of this episode.
Yes, we will.
Also joining us, Chris Talgo, senior editor here at the Heartland Institute. How are you doing today, good sir?
Doing good, and I've got a piece of advice for Novak Djokovic. Why doesn't he just go down to the border and just walk across? Because down there, you don't need to be vaccinated. You can just enter the country, at your own discretion. So maybe he should just do that.
We are coming in hot today, folks. Coming in hot.
And they'll even give you a free bus ride to New York City, which is where the U.S. Open is. Sounds perfect. Come on in.
And
Novak.
they'll give him a cell phone, too. I mean,
that's right. Yeah, that's right.
It's a great deal down there.
Audio-only listeners that are probably catching this show on a Friday, you can join us a day earlier and watch us live, where we'll be streaming on YouTube and Twitter and Facebook and pretty much everywhere, Rumble, right? If you want to join in the conversation, leave your comments and questions. Maybe we'll show your comment on screen. Maybe we'll address your questions on the fly. And a little bit more kind of housekeeping things. Last week, I mentioned our upcoming Heartland Institute benefit dinner that is coming on October 21st, featuring Yomi Park here in Chicagoland area. And we showed off the little postcard that's over Jim's shoulder over there. But now we have an awesome new promo video that was made by our producer extraordinaire, Andy. So why don't we go ahead and play this cool event promo?
It's hard for me when people ask me what it feels like to live there. To be honest, I tell you, you can't even imagine it.
Another American front and center in Pyongyang's propaganda parade.
Only people who escape can give us the truth.
I escaped when I was 13 years old.
So you never went days where you didn't see? This is a normal thing to see dead bodies.
It was every day as like normal as like breathing the air right now.
I entirely thank you, people and governments of the DPR Korea, for your forgiveness.
A North Korean defector, Yomi Park, says attending a woke Ivy League school here in America reminded her of the oppressive regime of Kim Jong-un.
Every story was propaganda to brainwashes about the Kim dictators.
번터 전역이 우리의 핵 타격 사정권 안에 있으며 핵 단추가 내 사무실 책상 위에 항상 놓여 있다는 것, 이는 결코 위협이 아닌 현실임을 똑바로 알아야 합니다.
And there's a young teenage boy, I think, lying down, and his intestines coming out of his back. Even finding a rat is delicacy. I'm on the killing list of Kim Jong-un.
Yeah, it's a pretty awesome video. I'm gonna give you major props there, Andy. And I think that everyone that's in the area should click on that link or go to benefit.heartland.org and check out the ticketing information and join us. And I'm pretty sure, I think it's safe to say that we're all going to be there. So if you're a constant listener, you always chime in the chat over there. This will be your opportunity to actually meet us live. So Jim, any other words you want to say about this event?
Yeah, I mean, I think that video is very powerful, and at times it's even disturbing. Andy did a great job making that video. I tried to actually make that into a Twitter ad on Twitter, and the ad was rejected. So that's how powerful this is. I'm Gen X. I grew up when the Soviet Union was still around, when global communism was, taking over about half the globe. And then the Iron Curtain was there, and we established NATO to protect the free world from encroaching global communism directed by the Soviet Union. And since the collapse of the Soviet Union, there really is only, there's China, which is a great example of that still going on. But there, North Korea, it's just this, they call it the hermit kingdom. It's this country and this society that we have so little knowledge of because so few people are able to escape. She risked her life. She escaped at the age of 13. She made it across the border to China, which, she was then sold into slavery for a few years before she was finally able to get to South Korea, and then eventually get to the United States. Her story is something you don't hear every day. You can't hear every day, but you must hear, because it really does remind you of how fragile freedom really is. And I am so much looking forward to her talk. I think it's going to be very emotional. I think there might even be a few tears in the audience, probably many of them from me. You really should, if you're in the Chicagoland area, you can help support things like this podcast. You can support this great organization, the Heartland Institute, by attending our benefit dinner, and it'll be a night you will never forget.
Yeah, no doubt. Chris, are you excited? Are you particularly excited for this presentation that we're going to see in October?
Oh, I think it's going to be a great presentation, and I think it's going to give us a real world perspective on what does happen inside that hermit kingdom. There have been some reporters, and I've seen some documentaries, like Inside North Korea and that kind of stuff. But I think that we should always remember that still is coming under the North Korean regime, because they are allowing these reporters to go to certain places and report on it under their discretion. So this is going to be like one of the first times that we just get a real story of what life is like there, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's like, with all the stuff going on in the world and everything, we kind of like ignore North Korea, and it's almost like a joke where it's just like, oh, those crazy guys up there. But it's like just watching that like minute and a half long video or hearing her talk on Joe Rogan or anything, you realize you can't take this stuff lightly. Like it is insanity what like an authoritarian type government can do if their powers are not checked at all. And I think that this presentation in October 21st in Chicago will be an incredibly illustrative example of that. So, all right, we should get to our topics at hand. We got a lot to talk about today, folks. So yesterday, after weeks of speculation, the Biden administration once again extended the student loan payment pause. The pause, which started under Trump in April of 2020, is now going to continue through the end of 2022, which is 33 months in span, or over 2.5 years. 2.5 years of student loan pausing. Additionally, the executive action will erase $10,000 in student loans from most borrowers who make less than $125,000 a year. This forgiveness grows to $20,000 for people who receive loans through Pell Grants. It's all Greek to me. I don't know all the linguistics of all of that. Jim, what are you going to do with your extra $10,000?
Oh, I'm not getting that. I paid my student loans off decades ago.
Oh, shoot.
And I'm a big sucker, I guess.
That's right. Same with you, Chris, right? You're not, you paid off your loans, no?
Yeah, believe it or not, I had 3 jobs at one point to pay off my student loans. I did rack up $40,000 in student loan debt, attending my graduate degree at National U.S. University. And while I was in grad school, I had 3 jobs. And when I was a teacher, I moved down to South Carolina. And unlike most other teachers, I actually worked on weekends, worked on spring break, worked on summer break, and worked on winter break at a local golf course caddying. And every single dollar I made went to paying off my student loans. It was, very relieving when I finally did get them paid off. And I guess I should have just not paid them off, Guess I should have just waited for good old Uncle Sam to just, pay off, a significant portion of my loans. But you know what? I'm a principled person and I try to do the right thing. And when you take out a loan, whether it's for a car or whether it's for an education or, a couch, whatever, it's incumbent upon you to pay back that loan. It is not incumbent upon other people. And I know we're going to talk a lot about this, but man, it really frustrates me. It really frustrates me.
Yeah, we'll get to. I've got like 5 different angles of this story that I want to cover. And to your point about the, you're financially responsible and you were trying to pay off the loans as quickly as possible. All of that stuff during the first 4, 5, 6 months of the freeze, I thought this is a good opportunity to continue to make my payments, not accrue any interest and all of this stuff, and kind of get ahead of this while it's being paused. And then as I saw kind of the political winds shift and all of that, I was just like, why am I doing this? It's all going to be forgiven at some point. And I decided then I'm not going to pay 1 cent towards this that I don't need to, because again, in my cynical worldview, this is probably going to be forgiven at some point. So that's the signal that they're sending people, and a message received from me, because that's exactly what I did. And now I have, not to get into personal specifics here, but my student loans, I think is I have to check back on it, but I think it's a little bit under 10,000 if you add it all together. So I might be completely wiped clean from all of this. So if I paid for those 33 months, it would have all been for nothing. So that's the world that we're in now with all of this.
Well, and Donnie, what they're doing is introducing a moral hazard, across
moral
the country.
hazard. I'm going to bring that up later. I couldn't think of the term. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I don't. I mean, if you want to discuss it later, but I do think that this is telling people, hey, when you take out a loan, you don't have to pay it back because of extenuating circumstances, because it's unfair, because of this, that, and the other thing. And I think that it's sending a very dangerous signal to the American people that, hey, you know what? Maybe that auto loan you took out, maybe you don't have to pay that back, or the credit card loan. I mean, the slippery slope argument, I think, is extremely relevant here.
Yeah. And Andy Buckets that called me a communist in the chat there. Just wait. I got some more communist stuff for you later, but we'll save that. So let's start with angle number 1 that I want to take. So who is this going to help, right? So is it the truly needy or the relatively well-off that are going to get all the benefits from this plan? So I'm reading from, this is a article from the Federalist that is titled "Studies Show Biden's Illegal Student Debt Scheme is Welfare for the Rich." And in it, there's a paragraph that says, according to an analysis of Biden's plan from the University of Pennsylvania out Tuesday, such a wide-ranging bailout will come with a price tag of $300 to $980 billion for American taxpayers. Furthermore, the university calculated, quote, between 69 and 73% of the debt forgiven accrues to households in the top 60% of the income distribution. Not only that, the liberal Brookings Institution did a study about a couple of years ago. It says, according to Brookings, quote, the highest income 40% of households, those with incomes above $74,000, owe almost 60% of the outstanding education debt and make almost 3/4 of their payments. The lowest 40% of households just under 20% of the outstanding debt and make only 10% of the payments. So it looks like, according to some of these things, that the people that are more relatively well off are going to reap the benefits of all of this. And here's another stat that they mention in this. And this is one that I've heard from grade school, so I'm not sure. I can't imagine that it still holds up. But it says, meanwhile, students that take on loans are far better equipped to pay them off than many other American taxpayers. Typical worker with a bachelor's degree is likely to earn nearly $1 million more over their career lifetime than the same person with just a high school diploma. So, Jim, I'll go to you first with your thoughts of all of this here.
Well, it seems Democrats really love giving money away to their rich liberal base. I mean, the electric car rebate. It's like an electric car costs $60,000. It's basically a second car for wealthy people who like to virtue signal or just show how cool they are by driving a Tesla. So the Democrats made sure that happens in all the legislation they do on the climate. And now there's this example. I mean, the student loan waiver here is for couples that earn up to $250,000, $250,000 in annual salary is enough to get you and your wife's your student loans just waived. And so we're talking about lawyers. We're talking about some of the that's a lot of income. That is a $250,000 family income. I think puts you in the top 1% or very, very close to it. Certainly, easily within the top 10%. And so that's where this, this is like reverse welfare. These are people, as you noted, that do not need it and are, I love you, Donnie. We're good friends. I can't actually even fault you for gaming the system and having your whatever you have left over, $8,000 of your loan taken away. I mean, I'm mad about it, but I can't be mad at you.
Yeah, I'm not advocating for this, people, like in the chat.
Right. You're just right. Yeah, you're just not being a sucker. But and hats off to you, I guess, on that one, because the rest of us are suckers. And you mentioned in there in the stories that you were reading that it is the college educated that have the most that have the higher incomes and that need this kind of relief the least. What about people who, instead of going to college, went to a trade school or went to and learned a skill like, say, plumbing? What about the $30,000 loan they took out for their truck that they had to use for their business? What about small business owners who have taken out loans to invest in their companies when they didn't go to college? Those people get nothing. They're screwed over. This is really this is a redistribution of wealth from the poor to the rich. This is and they say it's going to cost $300 billion. And I want to get back into the idea that Biden can even do this. Under the Constitution, $300 billion, and that's the minimum. When they say it's $300 to $900 billion, let's just round it up to $1 trillion because it's always on the high end anyway. So this is $1 trillion transfer of wealth from the poor and the middle class to the wealthy. I saw a story the other day. I didn't click on it, but the headline was that the majority of White House staffers are eligible for this loan waiver.
Oh, great.
So this is our ruling elite and our ruling elite in training that are benefiting from an unconstitutional act by a rogue tyrant president. He does not have the power to do this. I do want to get into that in a minute, but I'm trying to keep my cool here, and we'll just move on to Chris.
Well, yeah, we'll give you a few more opportunities to blow your stack. There's no doubt about that. Chris, I want to play one video from our gracious president because he was asked as he was walking off stage after this announcement about this is this fair question, and I want to show you his response. This is ridiculous. Go ahead, Andy.
Is this unfair to people who paid their student loans or chose not to take out loans?
Is it fair to people who in fact do not own multi-billion-dollar businesses that see why these guys give them all a tax breaks? Is that fair? What do you think?
What kind of statement is that? Like, no, that's not fair.
That's
are you
called
saying
a non
both
sequitur.
of these are fair or both of these are not fair? Like, it just is a ludicrous response. But go ahead, Chris.
No, it's also a non sequitur because he refuses to answer the question because he knows that it's completely, blatantly unfair. It's unfair, and we all know that it's unfair. It's unfair because it's it like Jim said, it is taking from people who graduated with high school diplomas and giving the money to people that took on tens or hundreds of thousands of debt to get costly college diplomas. So this is an upward transfer of wealth. It is going to benefit Biden politically because I think one of the main reasons he did this is because he knew that he is polling abysmally low with young voters in particular. It was really, really bad right before this announcement, like mid-20s. And I think that this is really just him trying to say, you know what, I got to get some votes together. Got to cobble some, some groups here and there. So one of the things I can do right off the bat, boom, just give a handout to young voters, try to get them on board. And I think that we're going to see more stuff like this in the next 75 days leading up to the midterm election, because I think that the Democrats want to maintain Congress, and it looks like they might hold the Senate, and it actually looks like they might hold the House. And I think that these are just political ploys to try to shore up their base.
Yeah.
I really think that that's all this boils down to.
Yeah, I've got a question about the politics of all of this that I want to bring up later too. But I see a question over in the chat there. Is this legal? How will this be stopped? So that's kind of the next facet that I want to take onto this. So there was an article, I forget which one. Oh, I think it's the Federalist article. And it says, at the same time, the White House's unilateral plans are legally questionable at best. In January last year, the Department of Education released an 8-page memo stating that the agency lacks the statutory authority to cancel, compromise, discharge, or forgive on a blanket or mass basis principal balances of student loans and or materially modify the repayment amounts or terms thereof. In other words, without congressional approval, Biden's decision to wipe out a minimum of $300 billion in student debt with a stroke of a pen is unconstitutional, according to the department. So that's the Department of Education saying that. Well, who else is weighing in on this important question? How about Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House of Representatives for 99 out of the past 115 years? We have a clip of her addressing this exact same thing. So why don't we go ahead and play this clip of Nancy Pelosi talking about it?
The President of the United States has the power for debt forgiveness. He does not. He can postpone, he can delay, but he does not have that power. That has to be an act of Congress.
So that was Nancy Pelosi talking 15 years ago. Oh, no, wait, sorry. About 13 months ago. So it's not like this is taken out of context from just like where we are today or anything like this. It's a very contemporary piece. Jim, you brought that one to my attention. What do you think about the legality of all this?
Yeah, well, it's not legal, and it is a political ploy, and it may get struck down by the courts, although I don't have much faith in that either. But the U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 9, Clause 7 states, quote, no money shall be drawn from the Treasury, unquote, except that made by law. So it's in the Constitution. This is the master document of our system of government that Congress, which is the branch of government that is most accountable to the people, the most democratic of our three branches of government. It says that the Congress has the power of the purse. And in fact, it should start in the House of Representatives as well. The point of that clause in the Constitution was to ensure that no president could act as a king who thinks the public treasury, which contains our money that they have taken from us, that a president can't act like a king who thinks that's his personal treasury. And that's exactly what Joe Biden has done. I seem to remember it being very important when Trump wanted to spend money to build a wall on the southern border, that the treasury was not his personal piggy bank that he could use to spend on whatever thing that he wanted to do. Now that Joe Biden, and I don't think the wall was going to cost at minimum $300 billion, but now Joe Biden, because he wants to buy votes from young people, young college-educated liberals, which are not that enthusiastic about him, but they get a little bit more warm to you politically when you just hand them $10,000 each. And the idea that somebody can sue to stop this, I think, Chris, you came in my office. We talked about this earlier. I actually doubt it. I mean, how many times have we seen some kind of obviously unconstitutional overreach of power by the executive branch, and then somebody tries to sue to stop it, who says they've been harmed by it, and then we see a federal judge somewhere or a panel of judges say you don't have standing to sue? We live in a society in which an environmental group like the Sierra Club or Greenpeace that are well funded with multi-$100 million annual budgets, they can sue. And they can sue a compliant EPA to impose their policies on us because the courts have said they have standing to sue. But if you are directly harmed by federal action, you are often have your case thrown out of court by judges who say you don't have standing. And so that's what I think will probably happen here. This is the same thing. Well, again, this is why, the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, right? I mean, this is the same kind of scam. This is why our system, I think, is almost irreparably broken. The so-called Inflation Reduction Act was actually just a huge climate spending bill. and getting us into a green energy future that will fail us and cause people to actually die. And it was passed through what they call budget reconciliation, which skirted around the filibuster rules, which requires 60 votes for passage, because they finagled it and really faked the idea that this was actually a budget-related bill because it reduced the deficit by, wait for it, $300 billion over 10 years. And that's what Joe Manchin said. That's why I'm voting for this, because this is going to reduce the deficit. Has anybody asked Joe Manchin about this yet? Has any reporter tracked him down in the halls of the Senate to ask him, hey, your president, Joe Biden, that you made a good deal with, and all your friends in the rest of the Democrats, you made a deal to get this thing done. He wiped out your so-called deficit reduction in an afternoon with the stroke of a pen. And in fact, he probably wiped it out times 3. And, so we live in a place where a climate bill can be called a budget bill, so they could sneak it past the Senate by breaking its own rules. And now we have the President of the United States just arbitrarily writing a check for $1 trillion. And getting around Congress with Nancy Pelosi just 13 months ago saying that is not possible. You cannot do that. I am waiting for somebody to be able to sue and say that you cannot do this. Maybe it would take Republicans taking over Congress and the new Speaker of the House suing. If the Speaker of the House doesn't have standing to sue the president for abusing his power and just taking money out of the Treasury, then this country is finished.
Chris, care to comment?
Whoa, it's going to be a little difficult to follow up, but gee, Donnie, well, let's do the Donald Trump test. If Donald Trump were to do this, do you think that Nancy Pelosi would sit idly by and let this happen? No, she would probably serve impeachment papers within 10 seconds of him doing this, because it is directly violating, like Jim said, the Constitution, which grants Congress the power of the purse. But I forgot. This is beneficial to the Democrats and to the left. So of course Nancy Pelosi is going to be on board with this. Of course she's not going to do anything about it. And of course all the Democrats, and I've been watching the news coverage since, they're all applauding this. And actually some of them are saying this doesn't go far enough.
Yeah.
Bernie and Elizabeth Warren and AOC and Ilhan Omar saying, hey, this is a great start, but actually let's go 50K, let's go 100K, let's just wipe the whole slate clean. So I actually wonder if this is just a trial balloon, and I would not be surprised if maybe after the midterms they then say, well, we've already done 10K, let's just go 50K or 100K or whatever.
Right.
So I think I think that the political ramifications of this over the long term are going to be really, really scary, because this is opening up the slippery slope. I know that some people say, "Oh, slippery slope, that doesn't mean anything," blah blah blah. But no,
you're setting a precedent for sure.
Yeah, right, exactly. Once the president of the United States just declares himself king and just takes his magic wand and just arbitrarily just makes $300 billion just disappear, well, then what can't he do? Literally, what can't he do?
I want to, because Justin's not here, and he would have plenty to say about all of this stuff in regards to student loan forgiveness. He knows the details. He's read the fine print of a lot of these things, and I've heard him saying, and forgive me if I mangle this a little bit, if he were on, he'd probably be able to present it a little bit more eloquently than me. But he says that there is not a student loan crisis, and that all of these student loans that you get through the government and all of that can be paid in a income-driven repayment plan. So if you're not making anything and you've got $100,000 worth of loans and you don't have a job or whatever, the price that you have to pay is very close to nothing. And it depends on how much income that you're having, how much money you have to pay. So like, it's the idea that people are going broke over this. They shouldn't be, because you could just get an income-driven repayment plan.
Well, and Donnie, last time I checked, there were 11.4 million open jobs in the United States, and there are lots of people who are sitting at home just collecting, welfare checks, collecting, SNAP benefit checks, and now not having to pay their student loans. So, I mean, we talk about socialism, we talk about all this stuff, but I think it's occurring at a faster rate than it ever has in this country's history. I just think back when I was in college 20 years ago or so. If this would have been floated by then President Bush, it would have been laughed out of the room. Like, sure. Are you serious? Like, no, go get a job. When you take out a loan, you pay back your loan. It's as simple as that. what has happened to the United States in the past decade. I think a lot of this actually does go back to Barack Obama and his fundamental transformation. He did a lot of stuff on student loans, did a lot of, stuff where he made it illegal for private banks to issue student loans. The government guaranteed loans have just skyrocketed in recent years. Tuition rates have skyrocketed as well. Gee, I wonder why. And this is not going to address any of those problems. It's just a political payoff. But I think it's setting such a dangerous precedent to these young Americans who are already, willing to go down this socialist road and saying, yeah, you just make him pay for it. I don't want to pay for it. Just make that guy pay for it. So it's really scary stuff.
Jim, you sent something the other day that had something to do with that. Like, oh no, the government actually might have the authority to do this now. Can you explain that?
What? When did I say that? When did they? Oh, okay, yeah. So if this is challenged in court, what they're going to say is that the president has the authority to do this under his emergency powers. What emergency do you think? Actually, the Department of Education actually put out a memo. Well, no, that'll be next. But the his Department of Education, the lawyers in the Department of Education, first of all, said, I think it was January of 2021, that no, the president cannot just waive like the Pope and just give absolution for student loans. The president can't do that. It has to come through Congress. And then recently, they just asked the lawyers that he appoints to his Department of Education to, hey, why don't you rethink that and see what you come up with a better answer. If you'd like to have your job, that is, come up with a better answer. And so they just came out with a new opinion. Hey, you know what? The counsel's office of the Department of Education says you can waive the everybody's student loans under the emergency powers that you have for COVID. And this is why the COVID emergency will never go away, because apparently it gives the president unlimited power to do whatever the hell he wants to do to deal with a emergency for COVID-19, which is not an emergency anymore. You could almost even say it's not even really, well, I guess it's still a pandemic because it's still out there and people still get infected. Jill Biden just got COVID again. Yeah, Dr. Jill Biden and her husband have both gotten COVID twice in 1 month. So I guess we still are in a pandemic. But
go ahead, James.
No, it's okay. But he's doing this under emergency powers. And the only way you're going to get rid of these emergency powers is if Congress passes a law and then the president signs it saying, okay, I no longer have emergency powers. This is why these things, we're in such trouble in this country. Emergency powers need to be if you're going to give a president emergency powers, they need to be automatically sunset. And these apparently are not. And so, so the Department of Education under the HEROES Act, which was put in place after 9/11, which was then called a national emergency. And so the president was doing all these other things. I mean, this is so tyrannical. It's just crazy. And then just one other point, you talked about what Justin was saying about what percentage of somebody's income they have to apply to paying back their student loans. It was 10%. In fact, it was the undergrad payments had to be applied to like 10% of your discretionary income, however that's defined. That's now been cut to 5%, where it was. So I guess that some people that have like say $50,000 worth of loans, they get 10,000 wiped away. They still have to pay that other 40,000, but good luck with that. Those payments are not going to be coming in very fast. But the Wall Street Journal had a terrific editorial about this today, and among the facts noted in this editorial was that unemployment among college graduates is near a record low of 2%. So these are people who have jobs and who have higher paying jobs than a lot of other people. And we're not going to make them pay back the loans that they took out. And this was just the inevitable. This was always going to come. We always knew this was coming, Chris. You and I talked about this again yesterday, that, it used to be, I mean, I got my student loans. I borrowed it from a bank. It was a private loan that I had to pay back. So there was no chance for me to ever get a bailout for that. But then we've now progressed, and the Obama administration did this, where basically, and I think entirely, I think it might, I should have looked this up before the podcast. I apologize, but I think it's illegal for a private bank to give out a loan to pay for college tuition. The government has a monopoly on this now. And once the government had a monopoly on this with guaranteed loans for students to go to college for however long they want, take out as many loans as they want, that caused the kind of inflation in tuition that has been going up since I was in college in the late 80s or early 90s. And it far outpaces regular inflation over everything else. The cost of college tuition has gone way up compared to everything else. Why? Because they're basically getting an unlimited supply of guaranteed free money from the government to charge for tuition, so the prices always go up. And now we're at the point where the federal government has a monopoly on student loans, and so this was the inevitable result of a terrible, terrible plan.
Yeah, Chris, I want to get to you. I want to let you back in here, but I got a couple more facets that I want to get to, and I want to save a whole lot of time for the Fauci sections. And so the question is inflation. We've already talked about these ridiculous numbers and all of this. The United States in the midst of the worst bout of inflation since the 70s. The Biden administration already passed a bill to combat inflation, but as we already know, it will do nothing to reduce inflation. It'll do everything to probably make it worse. So why not pour $300 billion more of gasoline onto this inflation fire? That seems like a good idea. So Larry Summers, this is an article I'm reading from. It's a Bloomberg article. Larry Summers, president emeritus of Harvard University and former Treasury Secretary, argued against unreasonably generous student loan relief because it is spending that raises demand and increases inflation. So this is all based on a tweet storm that he had where he wrote in a series of tweets, I hope the administration does not contribute to inflation macroeconomically by offering unreasonably generous student loan relief or microeconomically by encouraging college tuition increases. Every dollar spent on student loan relief is a dollar that could have gone to support those who don't get the opportunity to go to college. Student loan debt relief is spending that raises demand and increases inflation. It consumes resources that could be better used helping those who did not, for whatever reason, have the chance to attend college. It will also tend to be inflationary by raising tuitions, says Larry Summers. So no matter what you feel about the fairness of student loan forgiveness or the questions of its legality, you have to understand that this sort of government handout is the exact type of helicopter stimulus that directly leads to inflation. Chris, thoughts about this?
Yeah, okay. And it's even worse coming off the fact that the Inflation Reduction Act raises taxes. So the Inflation Reduction Act raises taxes on fossil fuels and a bunch of other things that went very unreported during the bill process. But that's just going to further reduce, macroeconomic production. And so in 1 week, they have raised taxes, of course, which is going to reduce the supply of goods and services. And then a couple of days later, they, just magically make $380 billion or whatever, in student loan debt just disappear, which means that those people are going to have more discretionary income, which means that they're going to go to the store and buy more things. They're going to buy more things, but there aren't more things to buy. What's going to happen to prices? They're going to go up, guys. This is like Econ 101. I mean, it's great that Larry Summers is ringing the alarm bell about this. But then, I think that a lot of people are discounting that. And I was watching MSNBC late last night and early this morning before coming to work and just trying to get like their take on all this. Their take on, this is going to be great. Consumers are going to get more money. They're going to go and be able to spend. They're going to be able to get mortgages. Oh, so they can go in debt even more. It's like, guys, wow. This does not make any sense economically, Donnie. It makes no sense economically, but it's not meant to. It's meant to be a political buy-off. So just like the Inflation Reduction Act, it's not supposed to reduce inflation. It's a political buy-off to their donors who want to go buy a new, Tesla and have us kick in $8,000 for them to go buy their new Tesla.
Jim, I'm going to race through a couple of things and then I'll come back to you. Again, I want to manage our time here.
I know.
But so the first thing, Chris, you already kind of mentioned this up front in our conversation is, won't this just make the problem worse? Like this just sends the signal to potential borrowers not to take this stuff too seriously because the government will probably just forgive it in the future. It shatters that price signal effect. Well, if I take out $100,000 worth of loans, I'll probably only end up having to pay a tenth of that. So yeah, sure. Sign me up for $100,000 in loans. And then that term, what was it? Moral hazard. That was
Moral
the term that I
hazard,
was
yeah.
thinking of. That is what it's being created by this.
Mhm.
And then the not far enough thing, Chris, I think you also mentioned this, that as many people that are on the right that are upset about this, there are just as many on the left that are upset about this. However, they are mad that Biden's announcement didn't go far enough. So you mentioned a couple of people that are talking about how, like, I think Elizabeth Warren said like 50,000 should be forgiven. Well, Bernie Sanders, my second favorite socialist, he said, no, actually, he's my first. My first favorite socialist sent out an email to all of his supporters that was promoting the idea of canceling all student loan debt. He has a new sticker that he's trying to sell, apparently, that reads, "Cancel student debt, all of it." And then around the circumference of the sticker, it reads, 45 million Americans are in debt to the tune of $1.9 trillion for the crime of pursuing a higher education. And when I read that, I just I face palmed because it's just so ridiculous. My wallet is empty because of the crime of me having to go to the grocery store and buying food. Like, it's just a ridiculous statement to make, but I wouldn't expect much more out of our democratic socialist friends. But I want to end this all with one other kind of conversation, which is there any solutions that you could get behind? Because this is where I warned you guys, I'm probably going to get heat in the chat from this, but I think that there is a problem with all of this student loan debt, and it is in large part caused by the government. Jim, you already just mentioned this in your latest rant, where it's the complete perversion of the student loan process, the fact that 90+% of student loans are backed by the government, essentially erasing the concept of risk from the lender, and the entire public education system repeatedly telling kids that they have to go to college with the promise that they're going to make so much more money after they graduate, has marched generations of people into this government manufactured rat trap. And then we question the actions of like 17-year-olds because of their maturity levels, yet we're allowing them to sign on to tens of thousands of dollars in debt. So I do think that there's like a problem. And I do think that problem is in part caused by the government. So I am sympathetic to the idea of something being done. And I understand that the solution that we're just talking about here with Biden, all of that, just riddled with issues. But I had seen this thing a while ago. I tried to dig it up. If I find it, I'll put it in the show notes. But there was like a conservative congressman, Republican congressman, that was floating the idea of saying, if we're gonna forgive all of this stuff, why don't we make colleges and universities with their massive endowment funds who've been jacking up the prices of tuition due to all this government perversions of the market? Why don't we make them pick up the tab for this? So, Jim, I'll go to you first. What do you think about my statement that I think that there is a problem and it is caused by the government for the most part? And B, what do you think of that idea of making colleges and universities pick up the tab instead of the taxpayers?
Yeah, I like both ideas, and you're right. This is a problem entirely caused by government. As I mentioned before, the inflation for college tuition is, I think it's so much higher than the regular inflation rate for everything else in this country. And it's because of all this guaranteed federal money that's in there. And what do these schools spend all this money on? They don't spend it on more teachers. They spend it on more administration and a more lavish campus to attract more students that will have to take out more federal loans to afford the tuition at these very expensive universities. Meanwhile, like Harvard, I think the average endowment for an Ivy League school is like $1 billion, something like that. It's enormous. They have these endowments, and they basically just invest that money in the stock market to create revenue for the university outside of tuition. And they're never talked about. They're never touched. But a solution for individuals, it's one that's sensible, that works for almost every other kind of debt, is being able to declare bankruptcy and to claim that your student loans are part of what, why you are bankrupt, that you can't afford to pay all of your bills. And when you file for bankruptcy and you go through the courts and they reduce your obligations, you still have to pay, but not all of your debts. That's what's the advantage of filing for bankruptcy. But you can't do that with student loans. And do you know why? Because Joe Biden passed a law when he was a senator exempting student loans from bankruptcy protection. That's why. Joe Biden did that.
There's a lot of cosmic ironies when you're in office for like 70 years. So,
I know.
Between that and like the crime bill and everything that he helped pass. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. And I was just going to say, we probably don't have time to play this clip now, but Steve Ducey asked the spokesperson at the White House, just made the point. Look, you can wipe out. The president can say you don't have to pay your debt anymore, but it doesn't make the debt go away. It's not magic. The debt is still there.
Right.
We're still out $1 trillion from the Treasury. So, how do you answer that? And she just put up this word salad of nonsense that didn't address the question at all. But the point is so elementary and clear. Just saying that you don't owe me the money anymore doesn't mean that I'm still not out the money. If I lent you $100, Donnie, and I said, forget about it. You don't have to pay me back. I'd still be out $100. But I'd be okay with it.
Right.
The Treasury being out $300 billion. I'm not okay with that, frankly.
Chris, feel free to address any point. I'm going to give you the last word on this topic before we jump to Fauci. Feel free to comment on anything or that plan to have colleges and universities pick up the tab instead.
My inclination is to be kind of a hard line here and say, no, I strongly believe in principle. And if you took out a loan, I think that it's incumbent upon you to pay it back. And I totally agree with Jim's assessment that the government intervention in the college loan process is the driving factor for this, just like the government intrusion into the housing market with the Community Reinvestment Act of the 1970s eventually led to the housing bubble burst. Banks would not lend to people if they thought that it was a bad idea to lend to them and that they would not get it back. Only the government can say, hey, we'll give you money, and if you don't want to pay it back, well, then we'll just cancel it or whatever. We'll just have the taxpayers foot the bill. Mm-hmm. So I would actually much rather have private banks go back into funding college loans, because then you could say, hey, I'm going to go try to get a degree in engineering. I think it's going to really pay off. I'm going to get a high paying job. That bank would say, okay, fine. We'll look at your grades in high school and everything, your SAT. And then if they think, okay, this is a good investment,
right,
which is, what it should be.
That's what originally was.
Right. Then we will give you the loan to go and pursue that degree. And if you pursue that degree, then you'll have a good job and then you will pay back.
Chris, are you advocating putting in price signals and risk balances and all of this back into the system? God, you're a radical.
Yeah,
you are a radical guy.
There's this thing called supply and demand. It just kind of works. Free markets.
Yeah,
but
ever since modern monetary theory, that's all fallen apart. All right, let's spend the last 15 minutes or so talking about good old St. Fauci. So, Dr. Anthony Fauci is retiring. Fauci, who has been in the public health sector for more than 50 years and served as an advisor to every president since Ronald Reagan, is set to finally put down his stethoscope in December. Well, if we want to be more accurate about it, he's going to put down his lapel mic because he's seemingly just on every news station for the past 2.5 years in December. So, Jim, let's start with you. Are you going to miss Fauci?
Well, I mean, with Fauci gone, I don't know how we're going to figure out how many members of our family we're allowed to invite over for Thanksgiving. Without Fauci that's right. He's not retiring until December. So great. Okay. Whew, one more Thanksgiving in which Fauci can tell us how many loved ones we can have around us for the holidays. He's going to get you know what his pension is going to be?
$300 billion.
Nah, it's $350,000 a year for the rest of his life, which is nice in his annual pension. And that's on top of all the money that he made from Big Pharma on the side while being a public servant.
And the books that he's going to write, surely.
And the books, and all that stuff.
Movie that's going to be based off
movie
of
deal.
Yeah.
There's already been some.
Oh, God.
Yeah. So, good riddance, public. Yeah. So good riddance to this so-called public servant who's really only served his own bank account and ego, and he can't leave fast enough.
Yeah, so we have a series of clips here that I refer to as his lowlights, and as I was finding some of them, they were just kind of coming to mind, and it was just the idea that this guy is an absolute egomaniac. So
no way.
Right. So the first clip that I want to play is the one that we've covered before, which is the basically Fauci claiming that he is science. So let's go ahead and play that one.
He is science.
One of the things that I have spoken about consistently from the very beginning have been fundamentally based on science. Sometimes those things were inconvenient truths for people, and there was pushback against me. So if you are trying to, get at me as a public health official and a scientist, you're really attacking not only Dr. Anthony Fauci, you're attacking science. And anybody that looks at what's going on clearly sees that. You have to be asleep not to see that. That is what's going on.
Anyone who
science
refers to
and the
themselves in the
truth
third person should be banned from government
Oh,
service.
there's plenty of that. There's plenty of that.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I apologize for me like visually cringing at this because this stuff is nails on a chalkboard to me. I apologize, but I've got another clip of him. This one's a little bit more recent. This is him talking about the Fauci effect. So let's go ahead and play this. Look how modest Fauci is when he's talking about this too. So just dripping in modesty. Go ahead, Andy.
Called the Fauci effect, which is sort of like, trust me, I don't get excited about that.
You don't look excited.
I mean, it's nice, but I mean, people go to medical school now. People are interested in science, not because of me, because most people don't know me, who I am. My friends know me, my wife knows me, but people don't
Look
know
at everybody
me. It's what
mad.
I symbolize.
And
and what I
that's the smug-
symbolize in an era of the normalization of untruths and lies and all the things you're seeing going on in society from January 6th to everything else that goes on, people the craving for consistency, for integrity, for truth, and for people caring about people.
One more thing. Andy pulls me up full screen. Sorry. One more thing that I want to mention on just this theme of him being an egomaniac. This was a little expose on the New York Post that was showing some inside pictures of Fauci's home, his home office. So as you're pulling this up, Andy, I'll describe it.
It's a shrine.
It's yes. Fauci's office is essentially a shrine unto himself. And on his desk, you'll see that there's a little Anthony Fauci bobblehead. Over on the right, there's like a little magazine spread. And then up on the left there with the big red circle, if you're watching the video version of this podcast, is a giant self-portrait. Or not self-portrait, because I don't think he drew it himself, but it's a portrait of Fauci. He's sitting there doing work under a giant portrait of himself. This guy is on a whole nother level when it comes to egomaniacs. Chris, what do you think?
Well, Donnie, I can say that my office does not look like that. Your office does not look like that. And Jim's office definitely doesn't look like that because we're humble people. We don't have to erect, shrines to ourselves that we just, can stare at all day long. Wow, Dr. Fauci, geez, it's been a rough run for him for the past couple of years. We all know, and I know that we're not supposed to say this. This is very, very naughty. We all know that Dr. Fauci is responsible for COVID-19 because he funded gain-of-function research in the Wuhan lab. I am saying that because we know that happened.
The NIH admitted that in writing to Congress after he had
That
testified.
happened. Okay. Dr. Fauci, I strongly believe that he sees the writing on the wall, that there is more evidence that's coming to light. Rand Paul is not backing down on this one iota. And if the Republicans do gain back the House of Representatives, there will be investigations into how COVID-19 was created. And Dr. Fauci, I think, is worried sick about that, which is why he is resigning so conveniently in December, right before, hopefully, the Republicans take back the House of Representatives, because guess what? Then he just won't show up. And you know what? President Biden is not going to sick the DOJ to go put him in leg irons if he, is trying to get on a flight to go, visit his family or whatever, like they did to Peter Navarro and all the other people who have defied congressional subpoenas. So I think that Dr. Fauci is doing this to save his, and he's going to, get his golden parachute from the government. I'm sure that he's going to go and do a whole bunch of things and make a whole bunch more money. But you know what? I think that when the history of this era is written, it's going to reflect very poorly upon Dr. Fauci, because eventually, I guess I'm being an optimist here. I think eventually the truth will come out on the origins of COVID-19. I strongly believe that.
Jim, feel free to comment on all of that. But you also, in preparation for this podcast, pulled together a couple of videos. So feel free to tee those up if you want. Take this conversation about Fauci in any direction that you want.
All right. I mean, I don't know how to talk about this man, this evil garden gnome, this complete clown, this megalomaniac who has been wrong on every turn. He was wrong about AIDS in the 80s. He's the highest paid public servant in our federal government, making, I think, almost twice as much as the president of the United States himself. And he's headed up an agency. People kind of, conflate the Centers for Disease Control, which is Rochelle Walensky, another mediocre moron, heading up that agency, to the NIH, which is Fauci's department. But they have been wrong about almost everything about COVID from the very beginning. And it's just crazy. And actually the CDC even admitted, yeah, we could have done a better job. And so they came out with some changes they're going to make in the CDC moving forward. And it's all about getting more diversity and having more diversity hires, I guess, in the upper echelons of CDC, because that's going to fix everything. You have to understand, I think one of the big reasons Dr. Fauci is such a liar is because he's been in government for so long. I think it's more than 50 years. I've waited for somebody when he's been testifying before Congress to ask him, hey, little guy, when's the last time you saw a patient? He's a doctor, but he probably hasn't seen a patient in maybe as much as 50 years. And so he's just reading studies and only promoting the studies that had validated the draconian, disastrous in so many ways policies that were inflicted upon this country. He even had the balls to say, I don't think I made a clip of this, but to say that he hasn't shut down anything. He's been asked about, well, what about all these school shutdowns and the lockdowns, and everybody's like, hey, I didn't shut down anything. No, yeah. You just made recommendations that became mandates and that nobody had the power to even criticize,
right?
Let alone oppose. And then you have all these governors. I mean, there were free state governors like DeSantis down in Florida and Texas and Tennessee were more free states, but a lot of states, including benighted Illinois, is run by a leftist moron, J.B. Pritzker, and so he's going to do whatever the CDC recommendations are. So for that's the kind of arrogance this guy has. He even denies doing anything to shut the government down, even though he demanded that we all treat his recommendations, his senseless, not scientific recommendations, as gospel, as the law of the land. And what this really, I think, outlines is the real failure of our institutions. The bigger and more lavishly funded they get, the worse they are at their jobs. I mean, how many billions of dollars, how many people work in CDC? They couldn't look at studies or even observe that, say, a country like Sweden didn't do any of these draconian things and worked out just fine, or even better than us in many other ways. Nah, we're not going to look at that. We're going to reform the CDC by hiring even more people to increase the diversity of our bureaucrats. I mean, it's just, again, I don't know how to talk about this without swearing, but it's like, this is a complete failure. And we're supposed to celebrate his failure by giving him a $350,000 pension. Teen suicide rates for girls skyrocketed during lockdowns and COVID. We're not supposed to talk about that. The United States has more excess deaths not related to COVID than almost any country in the world. Why? Because of the shutdowns, the endless panic and anxiety that Fauci had inflicted upon the country, and to have him sit around there with that smug look on his little face and say that I am science and that there's a Fauci effect. If people want to go into science and become doctors because of me, it makes me absolutely crazy. And, he will be subpoenaed by Rand Paul. I guess maybe not. I don't think the Republicans may even take over the Senate. But yeah, he will never be held to account for any of this. He'll ignore all subpoenas, and you will not see people, you will not see him being arrested to account for his policies in this country. He's just going to walk away a richer man.
Jim, we're approaching the 60-minute mark here, and we have a couple of clips here. I don't want all your work to go to waste. Is there one in particular that you want to show off to kind of encapsulate how terrible of a guy this Fauci is?
I don't know. I titled one Fauci Clown Show. Let's just play that and see what happens.
Okay. Andy, go ahead and play the Fauci Clown Show. We'll end it with this.
And in fact, I think we need to make sure that your listeners understand I didn't shut down anything. I recommended to the president that we shut the country down. And the only way to do that is by draconian means of essentially shutting down a country. We know that we can do that if we shut down.
Well, I think one of the things you really need to do, to the extent that you can shut down temporarily the country, I think is important.
Well, if I knew at the time that shutting down would have such a dramatic effect on controlling the spread, obviously we would have shut down earlier. There are those who say you shut down you destructive things by disrupting the economy. And others say, well, if you save so many infections by shutting down, why didn't you shut down 2 weeks earlier? But I don't regret saying that the only way we could have really stopped the explosion of infection was by essentially, I want to say shutting down. I mean, essentially having the physical separation and the kinds of recommendations that we've made.
You've been a big fan of Cuomo and the shutdown in New York. You've lauded New York for their policy. New York had the highest death rate in the world. How could we possibly be jumping up and down and saying, oh, Governor Cuomo did a great job? He had the worst death rate in the world.
No, you misconstrued that, Senator.
It's
End it with a flat out lie. That's great.
Yeah. And so, of course, the shutdowns did nothing. Nothing. All it did was ruin millions and millions of people's lives.
Yeah. Yep.
The arrogance of that man. I can't stand that voice. I'm so glad to be able to get that voice.
Yeah, no kidding. God. Well, they'll probably have him take over for Brian Stelter on CNN, but we'll see. All right, we're already long here, so I want to thank everybody for. Did we flatten the curve yet? I want to thank everyone for joining us on this episode of the In the Tank podcast. Join us every week. You can catch us live on Thursdays at noon Central Time, streaming on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter and Rumble. Join the conversation. Put your comments and questions. Maybe we'll show your comments on screen. Maybe we'll address your questions on the fly. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, share this content, leave a comment under the video, all things that cost you absolutely nothing, but help our channel grow, break through those big tech algorithms to prevent content like this from being shown to more people. Also, you can follow us on Twitter at InTheTankPod, and you can send us your comments, questions, suggestions for the show by emailing us at inthetankpodcast@gmail.com. Jim Lakely, where can the fine people find you?
At Jay Lakely on Twitter, at Heartland Inst on Twitter, and always visit heartland.org.
Fantastic. Chris, what do you have to pitch today?
Well, I hope everyone goes to stoppingsocialism.com and heartland.org. We got lots of great content up there.
Fantastic.
And come to the benefit. Come to the benefit dinner.
Yeah, benefit dinner October 21st, like I mentioned, benefit.heartland.org for more information. All right, thank you all for joining us. We will talk to you next week.